Good morning and Shabbat Shalom. Tomorrow's Torah portion, Tzav, has two parts to it. The first half is a continuation of the laws of the sacrifices. But the second half is about the Shivat Yimei HaMiluim, which is the 7 days of inauguration. How Moses inducted and inaugurated his brother Aaron and his children into the priesthood for 7 days. And one of the things that Moses did was he dressed his brother and his children in their priestly garments, the special wardrobe that the Kohanim, that the priests wore while they served in the temple. Now, on the subject of clothing and special clothing, we just came from the holiday of Purim. And the pivotal part of the story of Purim is when Mordechai says to Queen Esther, the Jews are in trouble. There's a genocidal plot by Haman to kill all the Jews. I need you to go to King Achashverosh and intercede on behalf of the Jewish people. And at first, we know Esther is hesitant, she's reluctant. She says, I haven't been summoned for 30 days. If the king doesn't stretch out his golden rod, I could be put to death. But ultimately, Mordechai persuades her and says, this is your moment, that God put you here, and if you don't do this, you will forfeit your name and your family's name forever. And she finally says, okay, I will go. But, she says, I want you to gather the Jewish people and pray and fast for me for 3 days, and I will do the same. And then we come to chapter 5. And there it says, Vayehi bayom hashlishi, it's the third day. And now Queen Esther has to go to her husband. Now, if you never read the story, you don't know what's going to happen. Will she, God forbid, be put to death because the king will not stretch out his golden rod? Or will she go on to be the heroine Esther who saves the Jewish people? But here's what the verse says, and I always miss these 3 words, but here it is. And it was on the 3rd day, and then the Megillah says, Vatilvash Esther Malchut, 3 Hebrew words. Esther donned royalty. Esther wore royalty. And she goes to the inner chamber of the king, and the rest is history. And why is the Megillah telling us that she wore royalty? Didn't she always wear her royal garb? But perhaps there's a much deeper message. And that is when Queen Esther went to the king, she didn't go shaking. She didn't go fearful. She didn't go weak. She went with strength, with confidence. She put on her royalty, not just her physical garments, but her inner royalty, her sense of conviction, of faith, of determination. And that's how she succeeded. And what an everlasting message this is. Not just the Kohanim who wear special clothing. We as Jews have our special Jewish garb. But the most important garb is the one you cannot buy. But it's something that's internal. And it's internal because it comes from your soul. It's eternal because it's connected to God. And it's connected to your Jewish identity and your Jewish pride and your heritage. Knowing I am a Jew. I have 4,000 years of Jewish history pulsating through my veins. I walk with all my ancestors. I walk with God. That is the inner strength and conviction that gives you that royalty, that sense of strength and confidence. And even if the whole world stands against you, you know you are royalty, just like Queen Esther and just like the Kohanim who served in the Holy Temple. Yesterday I was flying back from New York. I was at Newark Airport. I get in line. There's a long line for security. And as I'm standing in line, someone behind me says, Am Yisrael Chai. I turn around. I see this tall gentleman. I say, Shalom. He says, hi. I say, what's your name? He says, Ilan. And we start talking. He's from Israel. And we start chatting. And he starts telling me about himself. And he tells me he traveled to India when he was younger to learn spiritual practices. And I said to him, what about mitzvot? Do you do mitzvot? You know, are you observant? He says, not at all. So I wanted to gauge his level of observance. So I said, do you go to shul on Yom Kippur? So he smiles and he says, I'll tell you the truth. When I was a kid, my father would say to me, let's go to shul for Kol Nidrei, and then we'll come home and eat spaghetti. He says, I do half of what my father did. He says, I don't go to shul anymore on Yom Kippur, but I eat spaghetti. So I realized I'm dealing with a completely non-observant Jew. So we had continued our lovely conversation. We went through security, took our shoes off, put our stuff in the bins, and we come out on the other side. We're collecting our stuff, putting on our shoes, and now we're going to go to our gates after having a 25-minute conversation. So I said, you know what, let me try. I said to myself, I said, would you like to put on tefillin? He says, betach, of course. I said, wow, I was so excited. I started looking around the area to see where could I find a nice quiet spot to do it. When he says to me, let's find a public place to do it. I said, whoa, this guy's a proud Jew. So I said, fine. I put my suitcase right down, opened it up, took out my tefillin bag that I had in my carry-on. I take out the talit, and I start reaching for the tefillin. He says, what about the talit? We're not going to put on the talit? I said, of course. I give him the talit. He wraps it around himself, puts it over his head, and then he proceeds to put on the tefillin as I help him put on the tefillin and say the blessings. And there he's standing in the middle of the floor of Newark Airport, tall guy with a big talis over his head, with tefillin on his arm and his head. He covers his eyes with his hand and says, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And I said to myself, this is what it means to be a Jew. He may not be observant, he may not be religious, he doesn't even go to shul on Yom Kippur, but he knows, I am a proud Jew. I am connected to the most beautiful faith and heritage, and I will stand and let the whole world now know loudly and proudly who I am, because yes, I don royalty. Let us carry that strength even in these difficult days and never forget who we are and what we represent. Shabbat Shalom.